Okay, well, hello and welcome to our program on fisheries in Nebraska. My name is Peggy Apthorpe, and I am currently working as an AmeriCorps with Conservation Nebraska. Conservation Nebraska is a statewide nonprofit that is dedicated to keeping our natural resources healthy. And one of the important ways we do that is through public education programs like the one that we are facilitating this evening. So we're very grateful to organizations like Nebraska Game and Parks and others who help us with our programs. Before I introduce our speaker, I'll just cover a few housekeeping items. Your microphone and cameras are off. If you would put your questions in the Q&A or the chat box, we will address them at the end of the program. And a short survey will pop up at the end, and we'd appreciate it if you take time to complete that because it helps us with planning and funding types of issues. So it's my pleasure to introduce Larry Pape. Larry has been with Nebraska Game and Parks for 25 years. His love of the outdoors led to careers in communications, education, and natural resources. And his current job involves working with fisheries in Nebraska and helping people understand and enjoy our fisheries. He is a native Nebraskan. And so with that, I will turn it over to Larry and we can start the program.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Very generous introduction. I appreciate that. I'd like to welcome everybody. Again, my name is Larry Pape. I'm with Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And tonight we're going to talk about fisheries management in Nebraska. And this is kind of the 10,000-foot view. I'm going to share my screen here shortly. We're going to share it and do some videos and stuff. It's going to be a little awkward in terms of getting the videos up and stuff. So bear with me, but nonetheless, and we should be seeing a screen that says fisheries management in Nebraska. Jumping right in, no conversation about fisheries and wildlife management in Nebraska would start without a conversation about, who owns the fish and wildlife in Nebraska. And that's a very important question. And so this is a quiz to start off. Who owns it? Would it be the king? And that seems like a crazy answer. Well, worldwide, that's not a crazy answer. You find in many places that the monarchy or the king or the people in charge of countries actually are the keepers of the wildlife. Nebraska Game and Parks might be a logical answer. The owner of the land where the fish and wildlife live, that seems like the most logical answer. They're the ones who care and take care of these animals, right? They have them in their possession. Or is it just the people of Nebraska in general, those of us who live in town? Can we own the deer and the pheasants and the fish that live in the wilds of Nebraska? Well, the answer is the people of Nebraska are the owners of wild fish and wildlife in Nebraska. This is a very important concept, and this is a hugely interesting topic, the North American model of wildlife conservation. It's unique in the world, and there are some that have followed subsequently. But out of a motivation in the 19th century, in the early 19th century, there was a lot of extinction of animals and near extinction of animals. For instance, elk. Of course, we saw the demise of passenger pigeons and things. And there were people actually concerned about it. Theodore Roosevelt was huge in terms of this. Giant people like Muir. And they were concerned about it. And so they developed this concept of the North American wildlife, the management of wildlife, or model of wildlife conservation. This rests primarily on two important models, or on two basic principles. And one, that fish and wildlife belong to all citizens of the United States. And therefore, like in Nebraska, the fish and wildlife belong to the citizens of Nebraska. This is important because, so many other countries, it was the king or some other ruling, some local body or the landlords that had the animals. And so this was hugely different from what was present in the world at the time. The other one is respecting wildlife, and that is that fish and wildlife should be managed for their populations are present forever. This is why we're so concerned about endangered species. This is why we're so concerned about making sure that we have abundant wildlife, not only for just hunting and fishing, but for viewing and for the sake of them being there on their own. So North American model of wildlife conservation, if you're in natural resources, it's absolutely imperative to understand this concept. If you're not, it's a fantastic read in terms of studying it and learning all about it. Um, so in Nebraska, for instance, who then manages the fish and wildlife? We know that it belongs to the people, right? Well, we'll cut to the chase here. It's obviously not the king. The owners can be part of land, can be part of the management, but Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, the entity that I work for, that state body, is are the people who are the caretakers specifically for the wildlife in Nebraska. This is in partnership with federal organizations, regional organizations, nonprofit organizations, and of course, some private organizations. But effectively, Nebraska Game and Parks is the spearhead for the management of wildlife in Nebraska, and it is for the people of Nebraska. We do that. Likewise, states across the country are all set up the same way. This is a absolutely important point here, that if you have issues with wildlife or if there's wildlife topics, we are the spearhead in terms of managing them. Who pays for fish and wildlife in Nebraska? This changes across the country a little bit, but not much. Cutting to the chase, it's the people of Nebraska who pay for it. Fish and wildlife, specifically in Nebraska, are primarily paid for by the people who purchase fishing and hunting permits. Specifically, and most importantly in fishing, it's almost entirely paid for. All the fishing resources, all the management of all the types of fish and all the resources about them are paid for by fishing permit dollars. Hunting permits, very much so. There's also some additional monies. We do not, in general, we do not receive state taxes for the management of the resources. There's in-kind things where, you know, things go side by side, and fishing and hunting are a part of state activities, but we do not receive any dollars from the legislature for our activities. One of the important parts of the funding that most people don't understand, but really should know, is that there is a tax on fishing and hunting equipment. This was started back in the 30s, when it was recognized that there needed to be a funding resource to do those activities, you know, originally. And it was started out as an excise tax on hunting equipment, bullets and guns. And that excise tax to this day is paid at the point of manufacture. When that piece of equipment leaves the manufacturer, an excise tax is paid to a bank in we'll just say Washington. The similar excise tax was placed on fishing equipment, and it's called the Dingell-Johnson Wallet-Burrow Federal Aid and Sport Fish Restoration Tax. Every time you buy a roll of fishing string, a fishing gear, a wader, there's a tax that was paid on that at the original point of manufacture. And when you purchased it from Cabela's or Walmart or any place, you actually paid that, and you paid it all the way back to the manufacturer. What's important is that we get that back in the States, you know, based on a formula that is based on the number of people we have, the number of resources that we have, as well as the number of fishing permits. And I like to say that the equivalence to this is we have about 250,000 certified anglers a year at roughly $38 a piece. And that equivalent is at about $50 this last year. Our reimbursement from that excise tax was at about equal to about $50 for every fishing license we sold. So a very, very important resource of money for us. Fisheries management in Nebraska is broken down into several sections. We have the fisheries management section. We have fisheries production. There's the research section, and then there's the education and outreach. I'll go into these in a little bit of detail. And then in the end, I'm also going to address fishing careers, because what I do is not only I feel important, and we feel important, but it's also very rewarding. And if you're young and looking for a fantastic career, fisheries, wildlife, natural resource careers are absolutely wonderful. We're going to see a video here, and this is, I introduced Daryl Bauer. He's a co-worker and a good friend of mine, and he's going to address fisheries management and what it's like to be a fisheries manager. It's going to take me a second here to get this going, and there we go. Let me know if you can hear that okay, Chelsea. Or Peggy, I'm sorry.
Another hard day at the office. Hey, my name's Daryl Bauer, and I'm a fisheries biologist for Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And some days here on the lakeshore is my office. I love being able to get out of the office and work in the outdoors. Some days I even get paid to go fishing too. What's a fisheries biologist? Well, that's a scientist who studies fish. And I've been working as a fisheries biologist for 25 years now. But even before that, I was a fisherman. I've been fishing all of my life. So I can tell you a lot of stories about using a lot of different tools to catch fish. And sometimes those tools can be real simple. Something as simple as a string with a hook on the end, like a pop can caster. Or you can use a variety of fishing rods and reels. Or in my job, sometimes we use nets to capture fish or even big expensive boats. But the point is all those tools will work, and sometimes the simplest tool is what works best. When we're collecting pallid sturgeon on the Missouri River, just a plain old set line with a series of hooks on it, and those hooks baited with night crawlers, is the best way for us to catch pallid sturgeon. That works better than all the nets and boats that we use. Or when we're collecting largemouth bass, sometimes we want to see what those fish have been eating. And there's nothing expensive that's needed there either. We can just use some plastic tubes to put into the throat of those fish and then see what's in their stomach, so we know what food those largemouth bass are eating. So a variety of tools work, some of them simple, some of them more complicated, but you do what it takes to catch fish. And I've learned over the years that it takes a variety of science skills and outdoor skills to be the best fisheries biologist and the best angler that I can be.
So I started out my career as a fisheries biologist, a fisheries technician, and I can attest to what Daryl says. It is actually it was incredibly rewarding. Fisheries careers and fisheries management mean you basically show up for work and you may be doing a lot of data entry and you may be doing a lot of, public relations work, but you also get to handle a lot of fish. And for those of us who enjoy being outdoors, it's absolutely wonderful. The second part is that is very, very important to fisheries in general is the production facilities. And production means, the raising of fish. We use it as a term for raising fish and creating fish. And stocking of fish across Nebraska is absolutely imperative. We have populations, for instance, of bass, bluegill, and catfish throughout the state. And we know from experience, from our research, that those catfish populations and those strong bass, bluegill populations, for instance, always require some restocking because they never are capable with the predation of bass, for instance, of being able to are not capable of reproducing enough to satisfy the needs of people. So hatcheries are absolutely imperative for us to take care of those things. We have 5 hatcheries across the state that all do different kinds of things. One, for instance, at Grove Trout Rearing Station is specifically designed just to raise trout and make them and grow them from little fry into larger fish. We also depend a lot on private hatcheries. Places that can also supplement those because we are limited in what we can do and the numbers we can do. And private hatcheries, both in Nebraska and outside of Nebraska, help supply a lot of our needs. We're going to watch a little bit of a short video here on the production of fish. And this is specifically from McConaughey. It's several years old, but this is techniques that have worked, demonstrating techniques that have worked for, 50, 60 years. So here we go.
Walleye spawn every early spring along the rocks of Nebraska's dams. Anglers may camp on the rubble throughout the night to catch a brood or two. At Lake McConaughey on April 8, 2010, this monster, caught by Brad Cochran of Imperial, was just 2 ounces shy of being a new state record. During the spring spawn, Game and Parks fisheries biologists set nets to catch walleye or send up walleye with a mild electrical shock. The fish do survive these collection methods and the later taking of their eggs and sperm. After capture, the fish are placed into bins or water cribs. The females are separated by whether their eggs are already spent into the lake, ripe, or green, which means the eggs will soon be ripe. The green fish may be held a day or two until the eggs ripen, or they're simply turned loose. Eggs and sperm are massaged out of the fish. Water is added, and fertilization is further achieved by stirring the contents with a turkey feather. Then a Fuller's earth mixture is added to coat the eggs. This keeps them from clumping or sticking together. Next, the eggs are placed into plastic cylinders called jars and rinsed by a unit called the sow. Then the eggs are taken to our hatcheries. Fry will emerge in about 2 weeks, feed briefly on their yolk sac, and then get released into our lakes. Some of the hatch is allowed to age 40 days to fingerling size before being stocked in the lakes. Many of our lakes have a low rate of natural walleye reproduction, so the stocking program is a big help in maintaining good walleye populations for anglers. Here's a little bit of trivia. In the spring of 2010, the egg collection work was very impressive at Lake McConaughey. On the night of April 8th, 359 females were netted. This was a record for one night on any Nebraska lake and shattered the old one-night netting number by the dozens. Also, how many walleye eggs are in a quart? About 120,000. In 2010 at Lake McConaughey alone, 338 quarts of eggs were collected. Times that by 120,000 per quart, you get just over 40.5 million eggs. Survival of the eggs varies from jar to jar, anywhere from 50 to 90%, but at least 70% survival is the norm. So, the next time you catch a walleye, just remember, the fish you caught might have once been an egg from Lake McConaughey that was raised in a Nebraska hatch.
So, walleye spawn is one of the things that I dearly miss from my management days. Around April 1st every year, we would either go to Sherman Reservoir, Merritt Reservoir, or McConaughey. And that kind of work means you're going to be running those gill nets all night long, starting at dark on the rocks. And it's all wonderful when everything is 65 degrees and calm weather, but it's not always like that. I spent a lot of very cold, windy nights on those lakes, and those seem to be the best ones for collecting fish. But nonetheless, as a career, that was absolutely the thing we all looked forward to. You know, it was one of the first things we do in spring, and get to go to walleye spawn and help collect and collect those fish for the year. You know, fisheries research is also a very, very important aspect of what we do. And so I can't say enough about the research. We have so much cooperative effort between University of Nebraska, both at Lincoln and Kearney, in terms of the students that help us do that research, and especially in their master's degree programs. But the research helps us study things like why fish do well in some places, what diets they need, what balances there are. We're going to watch a little short video here of the of that production of research and so
The best way to burn fat and get shape. It's not keto, paleo, fasting, or vegan, and
Let me
it's
get
not
past
super intense
this.
workout.
there we go.
It's typical weather for early March, cool and windy, but it's also when northern pike come into shallow waters along shoreline rock to spawn. Nebraska fisheries biologists are checking nets and electrofishing up pike to tag them for a population study. Any shocked fish are stunned for a short time, but soon recover to resume cruising the lake. In the springs of 2010 and 2011, Game and Park stocked a total of 91,000 fingerling pike into this new impoundment, Lake Wanahoo, just north of Wahoo. Boy, have they grown fast. Many of the catches exceeded 24 inches, at least one female was 31 inches long. As of early March 2012, the lake was still not open to public fishing or other recreational use. This science was done in advance of an opening to develop an estimate of pike numbers. From the original stocking numbers, a survival rate of at least 10% is hoped for, could be more. Pike typically inhabit more western and northern Nebraska lakes, so biologists are looking forward to seeing how the fish do in east central Nebraska and the impact future anglers will have on the population. Down the road, anglers catching a tagged pike will see what appears to be a 4-inch piece of wiring cable on the back of the fish. This Floy tag contains an email address and phone number. Whether the fish is kept or released, Game and Parks will ask anglers to help with the study by reporting fish length, date of catch, and of course the number on the tag. This information will be useful in future management of the species at Lake Wanahoo as to whether there will be a need for further stockings or if natural spawning will be sufficient, but mostly to establish regulations for things like keeper centers.
Tag number 1566. Well, hey guys, welcome back to
Yeah, there we go. That activity, that pike activity is happening, as we speak. These past few weeks and the next week or two is actually they're collecting those pike and as a for instance, that very study, we started that in 2010. And what we're learning is that pike require being stocked. There is no natural reproduction of them. And that as long as the water quality stays high, that they will do well, and the stockfish will do well. We also know that in a resource like Wanahoo, where it's a high pressure, a lot of population around it, that catch and release is absolutely imperative. We've seen from the tag study on that many of these fish have been recaught many times, and therefore their value is as a fishable resource is only maintained by the catch and release value or the catch and release rule that we have there. So anyway, research is absolutely imperative. I am now, subsequent to being in the management section and whatever, I am now in the education and outreach section. And so what my job entails is doing a lot of things like we're doing tonight, making sure we communicate what we do, making sure we communicate the importance of it. A big part of what I do also is coordinating volunteers and doing events to make sure that we become part of the normal lifestyle of Nebraskans in terms of their entertainment and their outdoor endeavors. We do a lot of fishing events for families and children. We do a lot of school events and we do a lot of public resource events. We also work to make sure our website has a lot of the resources that make things easily approachable and understandable by the public, the people who are actually paying us. A big part of it is, and I always encourage people, if you have any questions, we're an agency that relies on people's feedback, and we're always willing to answer your phone calls. No matter what department we're used to that. We enjoy that. And so part of the education and outreach is public relations as well, and public encounter. So careers, I've addressed a little bit about my career and stuff. We're going to get a different aspect of it here. We're going to see Jordan Cott, a good friend of mine, and he was one of actually my employees about 20 years ago, and he's come up through and he's become a very fantastic biologist and a wonderful person. He's going to address a little bit about what it's like to be a fisheries biologist.
Drinking warm water before bed shrinks a swollen prostate overnight.
All right.
Thousands of men are
My name is Jordan Cott, and I'm a fisheries biologist in the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. As a fisheries biologist, we're responsible for managing the public waters in the state. And for me specifically, I'm in southeast Nebraska, so we got about 120 different water bodies that we manage. And by managing them, we have three main components. We have the fish themselves and other living organisms in the lake. We have the habitat, and then we have the people. And so we try to manipulate those three things to get the best possible fishing outcome for each lake. I graduated from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with my Bachelor's of Science in Fisheries and Wildlife. And then I went to the University of Nebraska-Kearney and got my master's in biology and with a focus on fisheries science. My first job was actually with the Game and Parks Commission after my first year of college, helping do kids fishing clinics, where we basically take kids out and give them poles and bait and let them go fishing for the afternoon. Yesterday, I spent preparing for an upcoming northern pike collection effort at one of our local lakes, maintaining email contacts with all the help, preparing our sampling gear, and coming up with a game plan for when we go out. As a fisheries biologist, you can expect to make about $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And that goes pretty much throughout the whole Midwest. If you get out on the coast, it's a little bit more, but your cost of living is higher, so it's about the same. Volunteer is always a good way. We have a lot of job shadow students that come out in the spring and fall with us when we're doing our surveys out on the lakes. So that's another good way to get into the field and just kind of experience what it's like. We have temporary positions during the summers. That's a good way. And like I said, just volunteering, coming out with us and just getting to know what we do. It's going to be the best way to see if this is a field for you. Get an idea of where you want to end up. So if you want to be a fisheries biologist, most universities are going to have a set of courses that'll direct you into the fisheries field. Or if you want to be in wildlife, they're going to have a set of courses that'll prepare you for that. Same thing with education, those types of things. So, it's a lot of math and science, but it's applied math and science. So it's not just the boring stuff. It's actually applied, and it's pretty fun.
So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions, but I have a quick question for y'all, and you can put it in the question and answer or whatever. We have a fish that's shown on the screen there. I'm holding that. Anybody have any guesses on what that is? No. We'll discuss that in the Q&A. If you ever have any questions, you want to get a hold of us, our website is outdoornebraska.gov. It's a huge website. It's very diverse. It's hard to get around, but because there's tons of information. We're a very diverse organization in terms of what we do. But if you ever need help with that, you can always feel free to contact us. That's what we do also. We have a lot of YouTube information, and we have a YouTube channel. We also do Facebook and a lot of information there. I encourage you. But first and foremost, please feel free to contact us. And so anyway, this image here, if you haven't made a guess so far, let's see if the Q&A has come up with anything. Hey, you got it. Rock bass. Owen Reeves, good job. It's a rock bass. And what's unique about this is that I caught this in Salt Creek here in Lincoln about 4 or 5 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. Anyway, a complete surprise. If you're out from Western Nebraska, you're very much in tune with this fish, and you know what it is because they exist throughout Western Nebraska, but they're kind of rare in Eastern Nebraska. And I caught this on Salt Creek, And I came back to the office and I started questioning the other biologists, and come to find out we've stocked these in Conestoga Reservoir, which is just south and west of Lincoln, and it flows into Salt Creek. And so matching the size of this fish and the ones that are in the lake from what we stock there, we deduced that it was probably one of those that came out of the lake. But nonetheless, it was an important discovery for us in understanding that fish will move out of those lakes 20 miles downstream. And they're, fish are not as sedentary as we'd like to think they are. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and totally open it up for any questions you may have. And
I can go ahead if you want and read them. If wildlife belongs to all US citizens, how does trespassing play into, for example, going onto a farmer's land and just fishing out of his pond?
Land rights trump, just about everything. You cannot trespass. And even if you see a pheasant or a deer, they're fishing that pond over there, you can't trespass. Those are land rights. And within, streams, there's a couple different philosophies, east and west United States. For instance, you cannot tread on a stream now if you're touching the bottom here. You can't walk up a stream and walk onto somebody's land that way. If you're in eastern United States, actually, it's high water mark to high water mark you can tread on. But no, trespassing rights are very sacred and individual rights.
Do you have an update on refuge lakes?
Update on refuge lakes. There's some resources on our website, but the best thing to do is to contact the regional office and talk to the biologist there. The refuge lakes would probably be contacting someone out of the Valentine office. His name is Zach Brashears. And if you're interested in that, you can contact me, or you can just look up the Valentine, Nebraska office and talk to Zach, and he can give you the lowdown what's going on the refuge.
Okay, why is fish natural reproduction often low?
Oof. Virtually every system in Nebraska is an artificial system. And so basically all the lakes that we've created for most of the state are actually created lakes, and the habitats they need to reproduce aren't always perfect. Plus, a lot of times the balances of those fish in the lake, their reproduction would be okay normally, but human consumption and human pressure often takes those away faster than we want them to naturally replenish. And so we have to replenish them as people take them is probably the biggest answer to that question, is that reproduction is lower than what we would prefer for our consumptive uses.
What kind of conservation efforts are being made for the Plains top minnow?
Specifically, I can't address that. Ironically, the guy right next door to me who happens to be here right now is on that stream team who is looking at those issues. And I know one of the things that they're looking at in terms of the Plains top minnow is movement of fish in streams where they would reside, and how culverts and those other kind of blocking passages can affect those populations. And specifically with things like Plains top minnow and other things that are endangered. So in the case of Joe, who's sitting right next to me, he is studying the effects of stream blockages such as culverts. So yes, it's very much. We have a specific stream team made up of 3 full-time people plus seasonals who address those kind of issues. Contact the agency and I can put you in touch with the people who can give you specific answers.
Okay. Can you explain about green algae bloom and the hazards of it? Can you catch fish when it is happening?
Okay. There are several different kinds of algae, and there is one that's actually called a blue-green algae, which is actually also called cyanobacteria. It has more in common with bacteria than it actually does with algae. So it's kind of a crossover critter, and it's commonly called blue-green algae. And what happens is when blue-green algae blooms, it just, it grows just like grass and whatever. It does very well in the summertime and warmer weather. And it just gets to, large extents in a lake. When it becomes dangerous is when it actually dies. So if we get some cloudy days or the water temperature changes or something changes and it actually starts to senesce or die off and die back, it releases a toxin, and it's a cyanotoxin, whatever. And that toxin is that nasty blue-green paint stuff that coats the shoreline. And that toxin can be very dangerous to us and to animals that consume the water that toxin is released in. It doesn't bother fish, and fish have, evolved with it over tens of thousands of years. Fish live in it. And if it gets really bad, it's dying off, will suppress the oxygen and actually affect the fish. But yes, you can fish in it and you can catch fish in it, and the fish can be affected by it if it's really thick and bad, but generally are not affected by it. The general philosophy, though, is, if it's bad, probably you shouldn't consume the fish from those resources that are bad, or at least wait till it's died back and gone away. And so the best thing to do, the most dangerous thing about blue-green algae blooms is people who take their pets, their dogs and stuff along the water, and the dogs actually drink some of the water and get very sick from it. And so,
Okay. They just stocked Tahazuka Park Pond with trout. What
yeah.
do I need to have to fish for trout? Requirements, I think, is what she's referring to.
Yeah, no, that's great. Trout are pretty easy to catch. And so a very simple fishing pole, fishing equipment with some hooks that are probably, no bigger gap than your little finger. And you can bait those with corn, whole kernel corn, marshmallows, little chunks of hot dog, or you can, go the bait store route and get power bait and put a glob of that on there or a couple kernels of that. Also small pieces of worm work. And you can try to start fishing with those like under a bobber, probably with underneath the bobber, 18 inches or so. If they're not biting that way, a lot of times they pick up stuff off the bottom. So you can just cast it out and let it sit on the bottom and then watch for the line to get loose or tight or a jiggle of the pole. The other way to active fish for those trout is to take something like a spinner or a spoon, something that's very flashy and moves through the water fast, because those trout have a very instinctive need to grab or desire to grab something that's flashy. And so that's a very active way to fish for them. Just cast a spoon out and reel it fairly fast, and change it up to see what they happen to like that day. But that's a fun way to catch the trout is with little spinners and spoons. But it doesn't take much. A stick and a string with some corn on it is really all you need.
Okay, has anything been decided about building a lake near Ashland?
No, nothing I don't think has been decided about that. And that's very much not a private endeavor so much as it's above and beyond the level of where Game and Parks is now in terms of the creation or not creation of it. Where we would get involved with it is after they created it, then we would get involved with what it would take to manage it. So the creation of that lake doesn't have a lot to do with us at this point. And so that's based on the private and political desires of what's going on there. So we're not there yet. They'll ask us once they create it and what to do about the fishery, and we'll be there. So
Why are most river spots getting closed or you cannot fish them?
ooh, I don't know the answer to that. I know Nebraska has more river miles by size than any other state, but we also have pretty limited access because so much of our land is actually in private hands. And you always have to, always have to ask access for it. You'd have to give me specific details in terms of what is being closed. Nebraska Game and Parks actually has, in terms of what we manage or own, have very few river mile properties. In the Lincoln Omaha area, for instance, Two Rivers and Louisville are two of the places where we actually have river access on the Platte River. And then like Schilling on the Missouri River has a lot of good river access. And so, but there are others. So you'd have to give me examples about what's being closed because I'm not sure of those.
Okay, what are Nebraska's, I think it is SEIN net laws, SEINE.
Yeah, sane. You had that. Perfect.
Okay,
You can use SANEs, you can't use them on public resources. You can use them on private resources. So and then there are stipulations on private resources so far below public resources like dams and lakes. The fish you catch out of those can only be used in that drainage that you collected them from, unless you have a commercial bait permit. In which case, there's other sets of specific rules. So seines are legal, and you can basically use them on private ground. You can never use them to collect game fish, bass, bluegill, walleye, the such. They can only be used to collect bait fish.
what are the best fly fishing opportunities in the state?
I'm an avid fly fisherman, and I live here in Lincoln, and I fish at Holmes Lake weekly, and I think it's one of the best places because I love to catch bluegill and occasionally bass on a fly rod. And so if you were to ask me, the best fly fishing opportunity would be Holmes Lake in Lincoln. But I know from experience that, as you travel from here west, and you have a lot of great opportunities for rivers and streams. We have publications specifically for trout fishing in Nebraska, the trout fishing streams. And you can go online and find that. If you can't find the resource, because our website's huge, you can always feel free to contact me. But we specifically have resources for those who are interested in cool water and cold water streams, specifically of the northern and western parts of Nebraska. And but my imploring here is do not overlook all the opportunities of all these beautiful city park ponds across the state, which offer beautiful fly fishing opportunities for bluegill and bass and other, like species like crappie. So.
Okay, thanks. What are the rules, requirements, license and stamp? I guess that would be for fishing permits or.
Yep. Fishing permits are required for anybody 16 and older. Anybody younger than that can fish without a permit, and they're held to the same rules and bag limits as anybody who is older and actually has a permit. For children, a parent can help a child go fishing without a permit as long as the child is doing all the manipulation of the equipment on their own in terms of casting it, setting the hook, and retrieving that fish back. Anything within that is considered fishing. A parent can help bait the hook and cheer on the cast, and a parent can help land the fish with a net or walk out into the water and grab it, whatever it takes, and be on that end of it, taking pictures and cheering on that end. But anything in between there, anybody 16 or older is required to have a fishing permit. They start for residents from like $10 for a 1-day permit and up to an annual permit, which is $38.
Okay. I think we've answered, if unless anybody has any more questions, I think we've answered them all. I'm going to put this poll up for just a minute.
There's
Um,
one more question here. Best places to
Oh,
catch catfish.
okay, go ahead.
I love catfish. And so if you're in the Lincoln and Omaha areas, one of the best places right now, and I'm going to give this up because of netting shows it, but it's on our record. It's Stagecoach Lake, not too far out south of Lincoln. It's a fantastic place for catfish, as is Branched Oak west of Lincoln. If you're in the Omaha area, I think probably Prairie Queen is a pretty good choice. If you're west of Lincoln, and you know, as you head out west, Calamus is absolutely fantastic for catfish, as well as McConaughey is really good right now too. One of the best ways. Oh my goodness, I can't find my resource. We have a publication at Game and Parks. This is the fishing guide, but we also have a publication that you can get from us, and it's put out annually, and it's based on our netting efforts and the different kind of management collection efforts we have, and it ranks those different resources based on the different kinds of fish. So that will give graphs, and I wished I had one here to show you. Of course, nothing in my offices makes sense, but it's absolutely a wonderful publication, because no matter what species you want, it'll give the lakes that are good and the lakes that are bad, and to show all the ones that we've researched and studied for that purpose. Contact Nebraska Game and Parks. It's on our website. You can order it through there or contact us and we'll mail you a copy.
Sounds great. I'm going to put the poll up. There, and yeah, just it's a real quick poll, but we do appreciate your taking time to answer this. And Larry, I'd really like to thank you. That was a very informative program. Also, the audience participation was wonderful. So we appreciate everything. If anybody has any last questions they want to put in, go ahead. And do you have a YouTube channel? Is that?
We have a lot of different YouTube videos on how to and just about everything, anything you would imagine. Since we're such a diverse agency in what we do, there's a lot of stuff there. So a lot of how to on fishing though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and end the poll. I'll wait just a few minutes. It gives me a timer here. Do you have any other last things that you'd like to let us know about the fisheries in Nebraska, Larry?
Well, this year is going to be a wonderful year. You know, low water is going to affect a lot of us in the eastern part of the state. I know we're still plenty dry here. I hope for rain and stuff to recharge a lot of places, not to panic. They're not so low as that it's going to create problems, but if you ever in doubt about where to go, what to do, you know, or other questions about such as what we've already had, and you want more detail, always free to call. And if, you know, if I don't know it, I know people who probably will. And so, you know, please feel free to give us a call. That's what we do. We're here for you because we're managing your resource and we're very responsive to that. So.
Okay, I think we might have a couple more questions. I don't think you, does your agency offer fly fishing seminars?
Yes, we do, as a matter of fact. This winter we had a fly rod building class. Most recently, we've had a couple of fly tying classes. Now we're moving into the season where we're going to be going fly fishing. And part of that is called Discover Fly Fishing. And we're going to offer 5 sessions this summer of Discover Fly Fishing. And what those entail is the Cornhusker Fly Fishers, which is an organization out of eastern Nebraska, cooperates with me, and their partners and their membership will come and help us on evenings when we do community fishing events and cater to those who want to learn how to fly fish. So there'll be fly tying demonstrations, there'll be fly casting demonstrations and teaching and how to. And if people want to, they can tie on a fly and they'll have people there to help you go down to the lake and try to catch fish. So how to find out about those is to look on Nebraska Game and Parks Commission website, outdoornebraska.gov, and go to the outdoor calendar. They're not posted yet, but they will be within the next month. And they'll on that calendar, you'll select for a category of fishing, and you're going to see the different kinds of fishing activity. And there's roughly one a month, or at least a couple a month, starting in May and going through August. And they're Omaha, Lincoln, Bellevue, Grand Island areas. And we end with the one in the Grand Island Central State. So yes. And the best bet if you're learning how to fly fish is join one of the clubs like Trout Unlimited and Cornhusker Fly Fishers. And those people in those clubs are just absolutely fantastic, and they'll take you under their arm and teach you what you need to know. How long is schooling for these positions?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I
Might
didn't-
have a few more. Go ahead, but yeah.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
The most positions such as mine require a bachelor's degree, and then to be competitive for the higher level positions, a master's degree. So most of us have natural resource degrees, fisheries management, water management, wildlife management as such as a bachelor's program. And then probably an additional 2 or so years as a master's student. And most of those are very specialized in fisheries management for the fisheries positions. And pretty much any of the biologist positions or greater, that's what's required. But if you're a student, don't be afraid of those. It's very enjoyable, especially when you get into those master's positions. They're enjoyable schooling. So.
And is the University of Nebraska, or what schools specialize in that?
Both University of Nebraska, the University of Nebraska has a specialized natural resource positions in fisheries management. And they also have a lot of staff through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Cooperative Agreement. And so we have a lot of master's program students. University of Nebraska Kearney also has a good bachelor program, more in terms of biology, but it also has some staff that have been doing a lot of research in fisheries and have been supporting that. University of Nebraska or Chadron State also has a strong biological program that puts out a lot of natural resource students, especially in their range management areas. And so.
Hey, can you get a master angler by just a picture of a fish?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And so the master anglers come in two varieties. One is catch and release and one is catch and keep. The catch and keep is based on a weight. We really would promote, you actually do a catch and release version, which is based on length. And all you have to do is measure that fish, fill out the form and send it in. A picture is nice. And so, yes, you can with just a picture, as long as you know what the length of that fish was and you measured it, and you can give that information as well. And so, yeah, master anglers are fun. So.
Okay, we have any other questions here? I think that was the last one. Again, we really appreciate, Larry, you taking the time to do this. And I think we had a great audience, great participation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Good questions. Yeah. Good questions.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess we'll say good night then and have a nice evening, everybody.
Thank you very much. Call me if you need anything. That's what I do. So, all right.
Okay.
All right.
See you later. Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.